was asked if I remembered anything about the first time that I met Paul, and I sure did, because that's an experience for anyone who was somewhat untutored in the Gaines idiosyncrasies, if I may call them that, because all of a sudden here's this guy and he's talking fast, and he's moving fast, and he's thinking fast, and he's got these glasses on this leash around his neck, and he keeps putting them up on his nose and putting them down and putting them up on his nose and putting them down. And I finally said, you know, this is the first aviation director that's going to get what he wants from me by hypnotizing me.
You have powerful first impressions of people. And he was a guy that spoke very well and obviously thought through what he wanted to say. And people paid a lot of attention to what he had to say. So my first impression was, this guy matters around here. He's kind of a doer.
One of the early assignments I had was to find a new director for the Houston airport system, and I had a search team doing a national search for me to try to identify who would really be able to take over that important job for the city at that time. And I met Paul because my team identified him as one of the top candidates in the country, and they brought him to Houston to meet me. And as we sat and talked about his experience in the airport industry and his vision for what we could do in Houston, and my vision for public-private partnerships and for a business-like operation, I could see that we were on the same wavelength, and he agreed to drop his life in Salt Lake City and move to Houston and become a part of my management team there in the city. And he took over as the aviation director in my first year as mayor and continued in that office and did an outstanding job through some very difficult times, and continued on as the head of Houston Airports even after I was no longer mayor.
I think it's largely because he's so tireless and so dedicated in terms of what he does. He never ever stops putting airports and their interests at the front of everything that he does, and he understands it and the entire situation that airports face far better than anybody does.
Paul's also a great builder. He understands what it's like to construct an airport, to start from square one, engage the public, get the elected officials behind it, how to work with an airport authority, and then how to move that ahead. And once he sets his mind to that goal, nothing really gets in his way. Yeah, you may bang into a few walls on the way, but Paul gets the job done. And in Salt Lake City back in the 1980s, that was critically important to us, and Paul pulled it off.
Probably hiring me, I don't know. Don't know from him now. I think it was just that training. I mean, so many different people that Paul talked to and worked with over the career. And in fact, it's ironic. We had it was before it was ACI, it was AOCI. We were at a luncheon at one of the annual conferences. And we were sitting at the table, and you know, people just come together as they do nowadays, and they come in and they sit down. But we ended up sitting at a table, and there were 8 people at the table. And Paul Gaines was there, and I was there. But 5 of the 8 people that were sitting at that table had worked for Paul at some point in their career. Jokingly, at that same lunch I told you about we were at, we all were just kind of, once we realized there were so many of us, it came around and all of us kind of unanimously agreed that from Paul you learn one or two things, either how you're supposed to do something or how you're not supposed to do something. And of course, everybody can make their own choice which one he taught them, but in all seriousness, Paul he has everybody that I've talked to that has worked for Paul, and I'm talking 10 or 12 people, I mean, it's not just a couple, that have worked for him. When I wasn't there, it wasn't people that worked in our part of our team have said the same thing, that they've learned so much. And the aviation industry, he just made them understand it quicker than anybody else could have, because of his broad perspective and knowledge about what he knew fast enough to use. So that's probably his strength.
2 issues. One is vision. Vision for the way things could be. And his competence. Frankly, his absolute competence in airport administration, and I think those 2 things together are the reason that Paul Gaines deserves this award.
I think they all said that, hey, look, Paul has shown me to be honest and direct and forthright and to be fair, and also to be considerate of others. You know, I think when you're mentored by somebody like Paul, and in some ways Paul has mentored me as well, you know, you should never forget that, because then you have a duty and a responsibility based on that experience to mentor other people as you grow up in your respective organization and in your career.
Known Paul as a professional and then later on as a friend. During Paul's chairmanship for ACI, he was really the man who got ACI off the ground because of his hard work, his dedicated time for ACI. Mr. Paul Gaines being instrumental in putting ACI worldwide in its highest. He's done a great job during his chairmanship of ACI. His relationship with all the region was instrumental in putting ACI in parallel with the EKO and IATA. He was very hardworking, and he worked for ACI with other board members as friends, and he was looking after all the regions. And he came in a very difficult time where ACI was 6 regions, each was acting by themselves, and with Paul's relationship with all the regions, he managed to get them together and worked as one team, as one organization worldwide. On behalf of this region, Paul, thank you very much. We appreciate all your efforts and your time which being dedicated for ACI. Because of your efforts, it was the cornerstone of what we see now of ACI worldwide. Thank you.